Hey guys, welcome to the Lunge and Lift podcast. Today we've got a great episode for you in response to a lot of questions we've had over the last few months about fitness gadgets. We're going to cover toe spacers, we're going to talk about belts, knee sleeves, straps, and lifters, and we're going to talk about massage guns. Hopefully, this will give you some insight into our thoughts and how you should approach these various different tools, if you should approach them at all. And you should have some takeaways to take away.
Yeah.
But before we get into it, please check out our website, lungeandlift.com, where we're constantly updating it with lots of good stuff. And you can get our 4 accessories to boost your deadlift download. And as ever, a big thank you to our show sponsors, Wit Fitness, www.wit-fitness.com. Use our discount code LL15 to get 15% off your purchase. And Hytro, use discount code LL20 for 20% off.
So I think this is a really cool episode to be talking about the gadgets, especially because just been New Year, Christmas. Maybe you've got some of these kit. So hopefully if we bash it, we're sorry. But if we don't, maybe you have a bit of you'll be able to utilize them in a bit of a better way. So that could be, I think, a really nice thought process. So I thought would be a really good one to maybe dive deep onto first is toe spacers, because after having assessments from yourself and kind of understanding my feet aren't necessarily super mobile, and they over the years obviously got a little bit more confined because of the shoes that I've maybe chose to wear and so forth. I started seeing toe spacers a lot on social media. So they obviously the toe spacer company obviously reached out to a bunch of influencers, and it was just like I was seeing them everywhere, and especially within the CrossFit sphere. And that's because I think obviously we're always looking for improvement, right? We're always trying to look to get better and try and do the least amount of work to get the biggest gain, which isn't a bad thing. It's like, because that's most people are busy, right? So if you can just wear something and essentially get better, it's great, right? Now, after the original thought, before I spoke to you about it, I tried to wear Hannah's nail polish toe spacer things. So they're like foam spacers, right? So I put them in between my toes, and just while I was in bed, and I was like, this is really uncomfortable. And I was thinking, this must be a good thing, right? So maybe let's start there.
Sure. Yes, it's something I've been asked about quite a lot in recent weeks. They seem to be spending a lot of money on marketing and getting some high-profile athletes and influencers to push them. So for me, whenever somebody launches a gadget or gizmo, the first question is always, what's it for? Like, what are you trying to achieve by using this? And the messaging that goes along with toe spacers is basically that normal shoes are really bad for your feet and that they crush your toes, and because your toes get crushed and bunched, that leads to poor foot mechanics, poor stability and balance. And that is kind of true. Like, if you wear traditional smart footwear like smart shoes or high heels or anything that is pointy toed, over years and years and years, they will start to push your toes together and they will lose their natural splay. And that can be problematic in that you lose a lot of the feedback that you get from your toes. Like, your feet are basically like hands on the end of your legs. And if you think about your hands and how dexterous they are and how much information they're able to process and transmit to the rest of the body, your feet are very similar, if not more adept at that. And the more information that comes from your feet, the better you're going to be able to move, because your body has a more accurate representation of your interaction with the world. Like, most of the time when we're standing up, our feet are the only points of interaction with the world. So are toe spacers the way to address that issue? We've just said, and they say in their marketing, that bad footwear is the reason why your toes are getting crushed. So maybe changing your footwear should be step number 1 to give your toes a chance to learn to use those positions by themselves. If you're wearing toe spacers for 10 minutes a day, but then you're wearing terrible shoes for 12 or 16 hours a day, you're going to be fighting a losing battle, because you're sending mixed messages to your feet in that for 10 minutes you're asking the toes to splay, and then for the other 16 hours minus 10 minutes you are asking them to crush together.
Yeah.
So I think that's my first thought on toe
So
spacers.
I think, yeah, 100% right with that bit. I agree there. And I think where people have the biggest issue with this is a lot of people have to wear such formal footwear into work, and especially when they're in the office. There's no real excuse at the moment where people are stuck at home a lot of the time, so you should be walking around barefoot realistically. Where if you wear your office shoes around the house, by all means you do you, but you don't need to. So something I tend to recommend, and I've been recommending to all my clients, is like trying to then find some footwear that's kind of like a hybrid of both. Because a lot of time people can walk to the office in, say, normal shoes and then get changed into work shoes when they're at work, if they're there. And you know, I've utilized Vivo barefoot ones because I really like how flat foot they are. Converse, high top Converse. Nano 2s were great because they had a massive wide toe box at the front, so it let your feet open up. And like I live in trainers, so it's easy for me to say, oh yeah, just wear wider toe shoes. But a lot of people that do work in the city maybe can't. So it's finding about what you can do, and if you're sitting at your desk, taking your shoes off and underneath the desk, you know, and so maybe get some slip-on shoes that you can slot in and out when you have got to walk around. It might seem weird, but doing weird things will make you a better person because everyone else is the one with the fucked up feet. You don't want to have the fucked up feet. So, and I think we all know an older woman that has feet like claws that just all clawed together. I've seen them and just like, how have your feet turned into like a triangle? And it's so bad.
Yeah. Pointy heels is the short story for that. So yeah, I just wanted to say a couple of other things on the toe spaces. If we come at it from a principle perspective, what are we trying to get the feet to do? And in those barefoot or wide toe box shoes, we're trying to let the toes spread. The other thing that's common amongst those barefoot shoes is that they're very thin. So the sole is very flexible, so you can feel the contours of the ground. But again, because we walk generally on very flat surfaces, which we didn't evolve walking on, we've lost a lot of that sensory input, a lot of that. If you think about walking on cobbled ground, the experience your toes have is so varied, and there'll be one toe that gets lifted more than another. There's loads of stretching going on between the toes, and we're losing a lot of that. And the point there is that the toes are built to move. They're built to experience three-dimensional movement. And if you're using something like a toe spacer, you're fixing them just in a different position. So you're forcing them to be splayed, forcing them into a position that they haven't experienced really ever. So from a tissue point of view, that can be quite stressful, which is why they advocate building up the dose quite slowly, because it is quite an aggressive change. Imagine like other bones of your body, you're basically wearing some sort of splint to hold yourself in a different position, hoping that the body will change. Like imagine you did that for your spine and you attached your back
like
to a steel rod.
You're walking around with a backboard.
Yeah, to try and improve your posture. That's not, your spine's not meant to be in one position. Your feet are meant to, and toes are meant to be in one position. So what we're trying to get to is a highly functioning foot, which is able to move in all three planes of motion, is able to receive the floor. So whatever angle your foot hits the ground at, your body can respond effectively. So there's a skill component of that, which can only be achieved through actually taking steps, through actually using your feet in a better way. So for those goals of better foot mechanics, stability, and balance, can we achieve those in a better way without toe spacers? I think so. I think your toes will end up finding a nice splayed position through change of footwear and through just using your feet in better ways. Obviously, if you've had a foot injury, then there might be some special circumstances which justify using toe spacers. I have recommended them to clients in the past when they've had broken toes or overlapping toes, something quite unusual. And that is coming at it from a splint kind of approach, which I definitely don't use very often. But I think with all gadgets and gizmos, what's the outcome we want, and can we get it in a better way without them? If in the case of toe spacers, I think for the vast majority of people, they can improve their foot mechanics, balance, and stability better without them.
Yeah, I think it's really important to just re-emphasize the point of, if you're wearing a toe spacer, you're essentially saying everyone's foot should be the same. that should all be this splayed apart and everything like, rather than, as you said there, when as an individual, we're all going to put different amount of pressure through our feet because we're all different weights, so they're going to need different demands. So where toes might have to say, as you said, you're walking up a multi-terrain floor, that you're going to have to push your big toe more, and do you know what I mean? But if you're telling your feet they need to be a certain width apart, when that might not be your width apart, you might be wider, you might be narrower. It's like your body is going to adapt to what you put the stress onto it. So if you're barefoot for as much of the time, much of the day as you can be, and then when the shoes or anything of restriction, if you have to in certain periods, then that's what you're going to have to do. You try and give your feet as much freedom as possible, and then walk around using that foot, not just sitting there with your feet, because your feet are just going to sit idle, right? So you want to be putting that stress so the body adapts. It's similar to the sit down, stand up desk principle. Like I've been saying to one of my clients, I was like, I don't need you to, he was saying about like tight hips and stuff like that. And I said, like, you do your mobility and say you're training, and then you've got most of the day sitting down. I'm like, maybe try the electric stand-up desk, something like that, where you can just go into it, or just take your meeting standing up. You're trying to put yourself into a different state for some of your day, because you can't necessarily have the most optimal like life, because some of most jobs aren't optimal, right? So you're putting different stresses on the body. So something like with the toe spaces is like, do we need them to be able to fix us? And it's like, as you said there, it's like probably not. It's put yourself into different stresses.
Exactly. And I think another benefit to the more natural, gradual approach is that the tissues have more time to adapt. So it's not such an aggressive, like you're not forcing bones into shapes that they're not used to. You're slowly encouraging them over time. So you're much less likely to have an overuse issue. Like you're saying, your toes were aching after wearing Hannah's toe spaces for a short period of time. Like that's a big sign that your tissues aren't yet ready for it. So if you're I think a lot of people, when they grab toe spaces, would probably not heed the advice of building it up slowly. They'd put them in for long stretches of time and overdo it and end up causing a problem when they didn't actually have a problem before. They just were looking for a benefit. Whereas if you just take the longer term perspective, you'll end up in a better position sooner, net.
Yeah, it's true. So maybe let's move on to the second topic of belt, knee sleeves, straps, and lifters. I'd love you to start this one, because I've got so many thoughts from personal experience, from clients, stuff like that, but I'd love to kind of hear from your point of view, because I'm going to have quite a bias on mine.
For sure. So we've bundled these four together because they're very commonly used in lifting, and I don't have any issue with any of them, and I think there's a time and a place to use them for sure. But my key message for them, I think, is that when you're using equipment to help yourself lift something, you are not actually lifting it. It's you plus the equipment that's lifting it. And being facetious, I always make a joke to some people asking about belts, saying, why don't you just use a crane instead? Then you can lift more. And the point is, it makes it easier, and that can be useful depending on what you're trying to achieve with the movement that you're assisting with equipment. So what is the stimulus you want for that exercise? So if you're deadlifting and you've got a weak grip, using straps means you can overload other muscles in the body because you're not limited by your weak grip. Whereas if you just deadlifted unassisted, then your grip would give out before your posterior chain got much of a training stimulus. And you could say, if you're a purist, just keep deadlifting until your grip gets strong enough that you can achieve a good training stimulus through your posterior chain. But that requires more time, more patience, potentially more accessory work to get that grip up to scratch. So if you want to keep improving your posterior chain strength, then use the straps, because the grip's not going to get in the way.
I think when it comes to straps, I've always been on kind of the fence with straps. I've always had two views, and I think I see the value in them. I really do. And I think, that point of, if your grip is a limiting factor, you don't want your grip to be hindering your posterior chain progress. So I get that. But I think, of the camp that if you can't lift it with your hands, something like a deadlift, and you can't lift it with a grip, then you shouldn't be lifting it. Because for me, being a compound lift of multi-joint, like the whole purpose of the exercise is not just a posterior chain exercise, right? It's being able to create total body tension, being able to lift a weight off the floor. Now, if you're competing, this is a slightly different story, which we'll touch on in a minute. But if you're just trying to get stronger overall, I think you should be getting your whole body stronger together so that it can keep up with itself. Now, the reason why I say this is because from myself, now I know where I say took some time out of lifting. I mentioned this before, but took some time out of lifting and gone back to deadlifting. My core strength and my core stability wasn't as good as, say, my grip strength was. So by putting on a belt hides that. And then I done my back in. So because I was then using something to kind of assist with a weakness, it got to the point where my body was like, yeah, no, mate, you're not doing that anymore, because I wasn't ready for it. Whereas if I kind of got rid of the ego, I was competing, so it's a bit different. But if I got rid of the ego and focused on, say, beltless deadlifts to bring up my midline strength in time with my body and kind of have a better feedback with my body, then in a better state. Now, just quickly to finish off for me on the straps, one of the reasons why I think straps are a great addition into your training is because they take stress away from the nervous system. Because when you're taking full grip on a bar, and especially when you're doing multiple reps at quite high loads, the recovery after a session is a lot better. And I've had that from my own experience, and I know others. So for me, grip isn't a limiting issue. So I know when I use, say, straps or whatever I use, that's not going to be hindering my grip strength from my top end, because I know I have a good hook grip. And I've never lost a deadlift based on grip. I've lost a deadlift based on strength. So it's not been my hands. I know that's a personal benefit for me. But now when it comes to clients, and I know they just need to get stronger in the deadlift overall, I don't use straps with them because they don't need to. Whereas then when I go into accessories for deadlifts, so then I might, so when I'm using Romanian deadlifts or something like that, then I don't want the grip to be the limiting factor, because the deadlift is our focus. So when I go into our secondary lifts, or whatever, that's when the straps can come in.
And what do you think about weightlifting? So I think, for me, straps have a place in weightlifting because they permit a higher training volume, which means you can improve your skill. So if you are limited by grip capacity, but the stimulus is improving motor patterns and technique in weightlifting, using the straps permits a higher training volume and more reps per session, which means you can improve that skill acquisition faster.
So in weightlifting, I am of very much agreement with that. But I think the main thing with weightlifting, along the similar lines of what I just said with the strength basic, like a deadlift, one of the parts of weightlifting is getting comfortable with hook grip. And if you're using straps and you're not hook gripping, say, because you don't need to, you're not training the skill of the hook grip. And most people have shit hook grips. So they might be able to get the bar, they don't understand how to actually hold on to that bar. So being able to maintain tension through the body with a hook grip and accept that pain that goes through your thumb, that takes time, that takes reps. So I think understanding the... So to take it into a practical example, so you see this online, like people go in for, say, hang work. A lot of the time, always straps, because again, it's what's the purpose of the hang snatch, what you're trying to do it for. But maybe you're doing it from the floor, which is the competition lift. So it's not an accessory of the lift, it's the competition lift. You're closer to always just doing it, say, without straps. But now if you say snatch, clean and jerk, and that's all you do, that's a lot of stress on the thumb. So you'd have to prioritize where you'd be not using straps and understand why you're not using straps, and then use straps in all the other times. But I think where it gets a bit misunderstood is people see a lot of the top lifters wearing straps, but that's because they need to recover. Just like I said about the nervous system stress, if you're essentially having to grip a little less and you can focus on the skill, even at that high load, it's just one less thing your body has to recover from. And your grip strength is a massive indicator of recovery. They say you can do it. I heard that on an Andrew Huberman podcast where he said, like, you can test your recovery for getting any of these tools, but just literally squeezing something. And if you've got a good grip, it's told you you've recovered. And if you've got a crappy grip, then you know you're just not fully there. And it's a really interesting principle. And that's why I'm like, weightlifting, I feel, is a bit of an exception to the rule because of the skill and speed component of it compared to then just the brute strength, let's say, when it comes to, say, deadlifting. In my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. I think one of the other things I wanted to say on it is, well, it goes back to our episode on limiters. Like, what is your limiter? And if you are a weightlifter, it's much more likely that you're skill limited rather than grip strength limited. At the end of the day, in a competition, you've got to do 6 lifts. So as long as you can hold your hook grip well for 6 lifts at around your 1 rep max, that's enough grip strength and endurance. So in training, sure, you want to have some spare grip strength and endurance in the tank so you're not getting close to failing in grip. But once you've got that, if you have a high training load, like you're saying there, shaving off some recovery demands by using straps isn't a bad idea because you save that energy to put into more total reps, more skill acquisition, more proper practice. And
that's this thing. I'm a fan of straps. I just think it's understanding the right time to use them. And I think because of, say, social media and stuff like that, where we see pro lifters and how they lift, and obviously they've conditioned their hook grip. They do not need to worry about when they're on the platform, they need to hold a snatch overhead and to get it into that position. They're not worried, oh, my grip's not going to be able to hold on to this, because they've tested their grip, they've worked it. But when you're getting into CrossFit or you're still early days in your weightlifting career, this is where you need exposure. Like, one of the ways I got this, what I feel like is like it feels like an unbreakable hook grip, is I just did loads and loads of deadlifts. And I literally did a little program, and I swear, I don't know what, but literally 3 weeks. And so I went through sets of 10 on the deadlift. It was like, say, 100 kilos. I then went down and I literally progressed. I think it was 10, 8, 6 at the end, and I did it twice a week. And I did it for 3 weeks. And literally at the end of that 3 weeks, I couldn't feel my thumbs anymore. It was great. So, but now, like, literally, so my 260 deadlift at the competition I just did, hook grip, and all my training is hook grip. Yet I wear straps a lot of the time because I don't need to stress my thumbs. But I like to do it every so often. Like the other day, I did it without straps because I still need to remind myself about that feeling. And that's, I think, because you can lose it, just like anything, right?
Yeah, you can.
And I think it kind of goes into the other points where you mentioned about like knee sleeves. Now, the competition I just done, I wasn't allowed to wear knee sleeves. So I did a good, say, I think it was about 5 to 6 weeks of training without knee sleeves. Now, I don't wear knee sleeves for the extra kilos on the bar. I wear the knee sleeves because it just gives me a good like sense of proprioception of like my knees feel secure. They just feel good. So I'm not doing it. So technically I am doing it for more weight on the bar because I feel better with the bar. Technically, I'm just realizing as I'm saying this, but I'm not thinking, right, I'm going to wear these knee sleeves, get an extra 5 kilos. That's not what I'm doing. I'm thinking more longevity. So, and along that point, being able to, like, I wear Ray-Ban knee sleeves, which are not performance knee sleeves. If I wanted performance knee sleeves, I'll be wearing SBDs or something like that, like proper ones that essentially give you some extra kilos. I think there's been quite a few studies on this of like what people using Ray-Bans and SBDs and like the amount that they actually give. And Ray-Bans do not give you much, especially because I wear 5mm, so they're quite thin. And they're essentially there for rehab, right? They're for like post knee injury. That's why they sell them in singles, not in doubles. So it kind of tells you they're not made for squatting, but people still wear them for squatting. But for me, that proprioceptive feeling of feeling something around the knee, it gives you an air of confidence and just like you feel like you can attack the bar. Now, when I did go through my block of no knee sleeve squats, I felt fine, but I did feel a bit more beat up around the joints. Now, because I'm just essentially putting more trauma through them without any type of, say, support. So for me, I was building a more resilient knee, which is great because the next competition we're doing is no knee sleeves again. So I've now got to take those knee sleeves off that I've been using and get comfortable doing that again, and that's completely fine. But I don't see it as a crux where I need knee sleeves to squat. I think this is where things start to become, same as like with the belt. I think if you start relying upon bits of kit to do the movement, you've lost the point of the movement. And that's not going into competing yet. We've obviously, I know this is going into it, but
yeah, no, I think, yeah, that's it for me, is that the more stuff you rely on and the more stuff you need, the more dependent your body becomes on some form of crutch. And for longevity, you want to build a resilient body that is independent and not reliant on kit. So even though it's harder and you'll be able to lift less, the less equipment, the better, as a sort of overarching principle. And the nuance comes in if you have had an injury and you need the additional support. It's almost like a scaling option where you can't do a split squat freestanding. You put your hands on something to help with your balance. Using a knee sleeve is another way of giving yourself some support and stability if your knee is unstable for a period of time, with a view to getting rid of it. However, when you come to competition and you are looking to max out, you want every bit of help you can to put as many kilos on the bar as possible. So then you want the thickest knee sleeves that are allowed, because it is a performance enhancing tool. And I think that that principle kind of summarizes these 4 bits of kit overall. There is a lot more nuance, but essentially, why are you using it in the first place? If you're competing, then you need to learn to use the tools most effectively. And this is something I wanted to ask you about, the technique differences between using knee sleeves and belt in particular. Like, you have to learn to use them, right, when you're maxing out.
Well, with knee sleeves, not so much. Like, as a knee sleeve, I think it's just that proprioceptive feeling of just confidence. So if your federation allows knee sleeves, then sweet, you're good. Then keep doing you and keep wearing them, because essentially if they're allowed, you use that bit of kit. But if they're not, and then you're not used to squatting without knee sleeves, then it can be a bit of a wake-up call. So it might actually be something you might have to think, if in your off-season, to maybe just doing a no-equipment squat. So you could do your same competition squat, but then just take no belt, no knee sleeves, and just do it completely raw. No lifters if you wear lifters, like completely bare. And then not naked, obviously, unless you're in your own gym, do what you want. But in commercial gyms, maybe not so much. But when it comes to the belt, I think that's a really important. If you are choosing to compete, you do need to learn how to use a belt, because it does, even though a lot of a belt's assistance is that proprioceptive feeling of pushing into something to be able to create better abdominal pressure, it's still giving you extra support and a lot more rigidity. And if you don't know how to use a belt, it can become a hindrance, because then you're not actually using it properly. And when you're not using it properly, it's just in the way, and then you can't actually brace. So you have to, because a really good example is one of my clients who's actually going to be competing with me. And he has never really worn a belt. He's always been just like no straps. He's just got some knee sleeves, which I'm now going to have to tell him to get rid of. But he's going to have to do everything kind of like to learn how to use a belt, because we've touched on it before, but he's never needed it. He's got decent strength. And people compete without belts. You don't need to wear a belt. But if you've got a tool that might give you the extra kilos and you're in a competition, that's what you're about. You're doing, as you said, you're doing what you can within the rules to get the most amount possible. And I've found it really hard to come back to wearing a belt where I hadn't worn a belt for so long, and it was a hindrance to me. But I then knew I had to wear it because it does make a difference. It's proven to make a difference. Like, you can see it, and I think just even from your own self. And just quickly, I know there wasn't on here, but wrist wraps, like. For me, wrist wraps are, if you're benching and you're pressing quite frequently, wrist wraps are great for just like, they really help your hands just like because again, you can take your time, as you said there, by not using these bits of kit and let the body build up that tolerance. But what I like to say build up to my top sets, wearing the wraps and wearing all I need, and then maybe do my back offs without them. Because then I'm getting the best of both worlds, because they do give you assistance, and you do need to learn to use wrist wraps. Like, even wrist wraps is the weird thing about wrist wrap. essentially squeezes your wrist and closes your hand. Like if you do them tight enough where you're supposed to, it's close your hand. And this is, I asked someone I was competing with, I was like, why don't we wear these for deadlifting? Because if they close your hand off and give you better grip, why do we not? It's not in the rules not to. So why do we not? And I haven't actually tried this yet, but I don't understand because it closes the hand. So with the back squat, especially with the low bar back squat, it puts a lot of pressure on the wrist. So it's not an optimal squat necessarily, a low bar back squat. So it's not a squat I'd recommend for people to do for longevity. So then, when it's that specificity again, it's like, what exercise are you doing? And are you doing it for health, performance, or aesthetics? Then it's like you're weighing that one up as in like, and for me, low bar squat isn't necessarily the best thing for you, but it's one of the best ways to move maximum amount of weight. So it's interesting, but I think as we mentioned, it's understanding why you're using them. If you're competing them, then practice with them if you feel you need them.
Yeah, I think the aesthetics point is actually a good one to cover off as well, in that bodybuilders quite often use a lot of this kit as well. And the reason is this stimulus is muscular overload and hypertrophy. So they don't want their joints to be the limiter. Like if your wrist, knees, core strength, or ankle range are limiting you from overloading a certain muscle group, you want to take them out of the equation so that you can just destroy that muscle group. So that is a good reason to use the kit. It means that you are building a body that isn't
functional,
developing in proportion. So let's look at the wrist wraps, right? If you are benching and relying on wrist wraps, you're able to bench a weight that you couldn't without them, but you're able to work your chest, shoulders, triceps harder than you could have done without. So that stimulus is achieved better, but you're not getting the same amount of wrist strength development that you would be if you were working on a weight that you could handle with just your own naked wrists.
And I think naked wrists, my old bare wrists. And the funny thing is, it's just because when you think about it, it's just you do have to weigh up. Like, okay, if I'm not going to work my wrist in, say, the bench press, where am I going to strengthen my wrist? Like, where is, at the end of the day, there's a clear one for some people, but how are you going to strengthen the stability? Keep it dead still then, and keep it locked in place, slightly kick back, holding the bar. But it's that sort of feeling is like, that's why I say like doing back offsets without them, because you don't really work your wrist directly. Maybe when you're using dumbbells and stuff, but I'm saying, okay, yeah. But when on this, knees, ankles, along the whole lot, right, this is where the case of secondary lifts or like accessory lifts, they're not necessarily using all the kit you do in your competition lifts. And I think distinguishing between the two and making sure you say, right, on this competition lift, I'm going to do everything I do in competition. And that's if you're doing this for performance. And everything outside of that, I'm going to go naked, go do my things and get exposure therapy so I can start building tolerance up. But then if you're not doing this and you're doing this for purely aesthetics, you do also have to ask yourself, yes, you might be limited. Like I like, for instance, when I do my step ups, I wear wrist wraps because I wear straps to hold the dumbbells or something if I'm using dumbbells. Because I don't need to, I'm not challenging my grip there. That's not what I'm doing. That's not the
stimulus you're going for,
No, exactly, right? So I don't want my grip to be the limiting factor. So I've identified what it is that I'm trying to target. So with the step ups, I'm trying to target my legs, not my grip. So making sure you have that very clear from your training. And I think that's where the nuance comes, is people understanding, don't just use it for everything you do. You don't need to wear the knee sleeves for your whole session. Just slide them down around the ankles and look cool, right?
That's a good point. I think that's something, it's a bit of a tangent, but an issue I have with like exercise combos. You see in a lot of HIIT workouts and stuff where they'll do lunge to squat to high knee to twist or something like that. And if you're ever loading one of those combinations, there's going to be one movement in that combination which is the limiter, so the other ones don't get taxed anywhere near to their limit. So you're not.
It's the lunge to bicep curl, isn't it? When you see that, the lunge to bicep is like, you can't bicep curl what you can lunge. Most people can't. So don't lunge. Do it separately.
Yeah, exactly. Get some overload.
Yeah.
Cool. I think, have we done that enough? Do we need to go through anything else?
Probably.
Do we need to talk about lifters?
We should talk about lifters, and I think the reason why is so. What's quite interesting about lifters is you've got such a wide range of lifters from when it comes to weightlifting lifters. So with really high soles, really high heels, and then you go all the way down to them, like we did in the first point we spoke about, where minimalist shoes, where you're pretty much barefoot. So you have such a wide range of shoes. One of the main principles, though, is you want a solid base to squat or lift off. That's probably the underlying thing of all of them, is why you don't wear running trainers to do lifting, right? Even like nanos and stuff like that, you can be questionable, but they're close enough to a solid base-ish to lift with, right? So that they're made to be multifunctional. But if you really want to be specific, this is where lifters come in. Now, weightlifting, one of the most important reasons why weightlifting shoes say with the high heel is because it just helps you get into that full depth, right? So when most people lack that ankle mobility, and it also gives them better stability in the foot because it's a tight shoe. So it gives you the options to hopefully get into a better position easier. Now, some people, we've mentioned before, like Gus, who has massive range of motion in his ankles, stuff like that, doesn't need lifters, and they probably become more of a hindrance to him because makes him go too far. Now, for me, coming from a powerlifting background, I found lifters put me too high up, so when I squat, I fall forward in my squat. This is why then there's powerlifting shoes, which is a bit like an in-between, where it's just, I used to have them, the Addy Powers. They're like, I'd say half an inch, like solid. They're great shoes, really, really good. And I'm gutted that I sold them. But really good shoes. But I now wear high top Converse, and I've got the leather ones. So I've got a little bit of grip now around my leg, my foot, and it just feels good. But it's a solid base as I squat with, because I didn't like squatting heavy in Vivos. It just didn't feel too good on me. So, but that's probably because I hadn't built up the tolerance of squatting heavy in barefoot completely. So,
yeah. So the other thing to say there is that you've got a low bar back squat, which isn't ankle. There's not so much dorsiflexion required at the ankle. So having that heel lift isn't really giving you anything that you need.
No,
whereas somebody somebody who's high bar or doing squats for Olympic weightlifting probably does need the help with dorsiflexion. I haven't got too much to add really. I think you covered it off really well there in terms of lifters. It's
I think you just got to get exposure to them. I say don't bash on knee sleeves and don't bash on not wearing barefoot. Like, expose yourself and try some on. See if you got a friend that's a similar sort of shoe size, if you don't want to invest in a pair. And for me, I found powerlifting shoes, like ones that like the Addy Powers, that ones that are kind of in between, are great lifting shoes because they've got a solid base and they're not too high. So you get that sense of like a little bit of assistance, but you also feel that thing of security. And I'd say give them a try and see if they're for you. For some people, they're just not. Like, some people just, as I say, like Gus is the example, right? He didn't need lifters. They cause him hindrance rather than helping him. But how would he know unless he's he's got extreme range, so he probably does know. But how do you know unless you've tried it and said, actually, this doesn't help me? Same as Sonny Webster, right? Sonny Webster's got a massive range.
Yeah, Chris Speed used to those as well, didn't he? So they, I think the principle basically is everyone would benefit from stability, but the heel lift is only if you require dorsiflexion to get to your deep position for your requirement. But similarly to the other bits of kit, what are you squatting for? If you're just squatting for general life, then maybe it's probably worth working on your squat position barefoot, because that has more carryover to life. But if you're squatting to get bigger legs, then use the lifters, because it's going to be easier to achieve overload and hypertrophy without working on the mobility so much.
And then if you are trying to get bigger legs, you probably wouldn't necessarily be just using a squat for bigger legs. You'd be using more accessories, where I'd probably argue you don't need lifters in the accessories, because the whole point is to be challenging like that area. Just wearing your lifters. Well, I've seen all those new attachments now for rigs and stuff like that. So I mean, it's intuitive. I mean, it's great, but Right, let's move on. I think we covered that one, and hopefully you didn't get too bored by some of that from my inputs there. But let's move on to massage guns. I love this one because I've known people to buy Theraguns, and I've got a knockoff Theragun. Amazon, it was like 30 quid or something like that. And I bought it in the hype of them, and I bought it based on the thing of recovery. And it was after you smashed it, and I did when I actually talk this through now, I do ask myself it doesn't make sense, but I'm looking forward to actually hearing your more thoughts on this. But I've beaten my muscle up, and then I want to beat it up again with an external instrument to recover from it. So was I thinking along the right processes for this?
Yeah. So massage guns, like let's do the same process we did for toe spaces. Like why are you using them? So you're using them for recovery. You're looking to promote blood flow after a workout so that you recover faster, ready for the next session. So the question then is, does it actually promote blood flow? Yes, it does. Can you promote blood flow another way? And can you promote blood flow better and improve your recovery better? I would say that there's a lot of things that people are leaving on the table before they're going to their massage gun for the extra 0.1%. Like if you are not doing a cool down, you should be doing a cool down. Like to promote blood flow, there's not much better than some cardio. Right? If you're literally using your muscles, you're also circulating your lymphatic system.
Yep.
So that clears a lot of waste and build up, which can only be done through muscle contraction. So the difference between that and the blood circulatory system is that the blood is circulated by the heart. So getting your heart pumping through cardio will circulate your blood, but the lymphatic system will only circulate through muscle contraction. And you can't, well, using a massage gun doesn't contract your muscles, so it won't circulate your lymph. So you're getting so much more bang for your buck from 5 minutes on the assault bike or 5 minutes gentle jog or walk compared to 5 minutes of massage gunning.
Yeah.
So for that use case, I think I would push people to just sit on the bike for 5 or 10 minutes instead.
So just before we move away from the recovery side of stuff, I think the case for it is where people complain about, well, no, they don't necessarily complain, but they say, look, I don't have time so I just got to train, got to get out and thing, and then I can sit at my desk or something like that, or in front of the TV doing it, right? And that's I guess the opposing case to what you just said there. So, and my rebuttal to that would be maybe do a little less work in the session to recover better afterwards, and maybe do 3 minutes on the bike or something like that. And for me, I think it's so important to have that cool down side of stuff, because of how you feel afterwards is so much better, because essentially you're going from a state of high like stress, and then you're then say, especially when you're in say the city or something, and you're going back to the office or whatever, right? You've had your high stress workout, and then you've got to go into your stressful environment. It's nice to kind of let those cortisol levels kind of start come down. You've had your stress, you get on the bike, let yourself kind of get mentally apparent, which is when we've touched on stretching in classes at the end of other things, and where I see the value in that, say that 5 minutes, say stretching at the end, because it's a way of us to kind of down regulate from being so high in the training. And I think using cardio kit has just been forgotten about, because especially within CrossFit, where it was all about multi-joint movements, big functional things, and then the cardio kit starts coming, obviously like the roads and stuff, but then say the biker come about, the assault bike, and these type of kits going over there at the end of the session just isn't a normal thing. You might see at the start of the session, people say, oh, blood flow, but then they don't think about that same blood flow is going to help them recover better after the session. So I think it's an education thing, but also I think it's about a better timing thing of maybe prioritizing a bit more the recovery of your session afterwards.
Yeah. I think that's a very valid way of thinking about things. So I think it'll also be useful to talk about the other use cases that people might have for the massage guns. In that, there's actually a trainer I used to work with who would use it to warm up his clients, and I just
was he doing it?
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant!
Yeah.
Right, you sit here for a minute. Let me just pound you.
Yeah, literally lie them down and use the gun to get them ready to go. And I don't know if we even need to go into like why an actual warm up is better, but getting warm there's actually like you actually need to increase temperature to
Yeah.
warm up. And
Yeah.
if you're just lying down while somebody massages you, that compared to doing some light cardio or doing some movements or movement prep and actually squatting, like air squats, compared to massage gun to get ready for squatting, I don't know how you
But
can
it looks good,
make an
doesn't it? Though
argument.
it looks like it's doing something. Because the thing is, I guess you're gonna. I guess where you'd kind of get the counter argument to this is, where it's like, oh, people aren't paying you to stand on a treadmill or or go on an assault bike and stuff like that. But I know I've touched on this in previous episodes where I said like I've used that time to understand the person in front of me. So
Yeah.
and there is that thing of getting that internal temperature higher, and then getting into some movement specific stuff and getting your body moving. Like rather than just going straight into squats, imagine that even air squats. So like you come from your desk and you've been sitting and you're then standing in the gym. Right now, let's do some air squats. You're like, oh, the knees are a bit, everything's, and it's just going to take a good few sets to warm up. Whereas you get on the bike or something like that, get the hips, get the knees, get everything, especially the assault bike is great because the upper body's then involved as well. It's just getting your body to start working as a unit rather than going from nothing to something. And I think where the massage guns miss the point is people see it as an easy way to warm up because it's less movement. And I think it's too often people are looking for the easy option to get the same thing that they think they're going to get. Whereas I think this comes into massively with your world of like the movement mechanics, like especially when it comes to like assessments of people's say imbalances, and then people having to do specific exercises to get ready for the session ahead. Now, those specific exercises I can take from personal experience are hard to do because they're weaknesses in the body that don't work the same. So to make sure that I work better, so my actual warm-up is then tailored exactly to what I'm about to do, rather than just getting this gun and say putting it around my hip, my shoulders, my chest, and it's like, it is, yes, it's easier, but is that specific to what I'm going to do? And I think that's the key thing, because that's the whole point of a warm-up, is you get your body warm, and then you start getting specific to the session ahead.
Exactly, get it ready for what you're about to ask it to do. And I think another thing that people think along those lines is that it's a mobility tool, that they've got a tight muscle, so they'll gun it till the muscle loosens off. And that does happen. Like if you have a sports massage or you use a massage gun and pummel a muscle, you will beat it into submission, essentially. Like the nervous stimulation will eventually result in that muscle reducing its tone and losing tension. But as we've talked about in previous podcasts, tension is strength. Like the force with which a muscle can contract is the force that it can produce. So if you're reducing its ability to contract, you are reducing its force output. However, there is a caveat in that if a muscle is subjectively too tight, it can affect your positions, it can affect your execution of a movement. So gunning it short term can give you a window of opportunity to get into a better position. Say a certain muscle in your hip is super tight and you pummel it until it turns off, you'll feel better going into that squat because that tight muscle is no longer resisting you. However, unless you do the work to get, like, let me wind it back one step. Why is that muscle tight in the first place?
That's what I was going to say. It's telling you something. If it's tight, something else is happening. And if you're hiding an issue, it's like fair enough. If you're getting ready for a competition and you need to do something specific and you got work to do, but for most people that are using these massage guns, and I probably that is quite a broad term, but I reckon it is. Most people using it are not competitive. Like they'd be box competitive or like at a good level maybe within the thing, but they're just subject to advertising. And it's just like, it's a good idea for kind of helping you, say, with the extra range of squat, but you're not addressing the limiter, which is like with the point before with the belts, knee sleeve straps and lifters and the tone spacers. All of these things, it kind of leads back to our limiters episode. But it's like, they're just hiding and masking other problems.
Yeah. You're sidestepping it, I think is the way I think about it. Is that you're basically short term putting a band-aid on the problem so that you can do one session. And like you said there, I think in a competition, then the rules change because it's all about maximizing your performance on that one day. But in training, which is 99% of the time, even if you're a competitive athlete, you're training a lot more than you're competing. You're looking to condition your body to be better long-term and overall. And just putting a band-aid on it to get through one session isn't the thing that's going to long term stop that tight muscle being tight. Having an understanding of what's your body trying to achieve with that tightness, like what is that tightness giving it that it's not getting from somewhere else? Is it that it's trying to provide stability to an area of the body because a major muscle group is not contributing that? And if that's the case, you need to sort that out so that the muscle will stop getting tight. Because if you go through that cycle of gun it until it relaxes, do your session, everyone knows it's going to come back the same in a few hours, if not the next day. And then you just repeat the cycle. And any sort of treatment like this, the dosage required usually increases. You see it with people when they use the soft foam roller, then the hard foam roller, then the knobbly foam roller, then they're onto a tennis ball, then they're onto a lacrosse ball, and eventually they're on a golf ball, and then it doesn't get any harder than that. And they're having to spend so much more time and effort and increasingly aggressive tools to get the same release, because the body is adapting against the release, because it's saying, I need this tension because I'm not getting what I need from somewhere else. And you're bullying it into giving up that tension for a session, so it only fights back even harder. So the long-term solution is to figure out what that tightness is trying to give you and get what you need from the place that you should be getting it from, so that that muscle gets an opportunity to chill out a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's key, because that thing of like your body's telling you something is because they've done a bunch of studies where you've got like a bunch of, like, say, NFL players, and they've knocked them out. I mean, they have to pull their legs all the way back, so because their body's giving into it. There's like, I don't need the restriction. So it shows a lot of the time it's not a tightness, which is you have a short muscle necessarily. It means that there's something happening to protect something else. So because that's happening, you need to ask yourself, okay, cool, this might be a short-term thing, or it might just be a nice bit of thing for recovery. You might want to sit in front of the TV and you do your thing, and then fair enough. If you've got the extra cash to buy one of these things and you think it's going to benefit, then fair play, do that and crack on. But I mean, you could probably do more with that time. Like maybe don't watch TV and go for a walk, right? You know, those things, and listen to something, or like, you know, those sort of things. Like it's you understanding why you're using what you're doing. And if you are using it as a band-aid, be very aware of that and understand that it's going to probably go the wrong way. And as you said, you're only going to have to progressively, like the gun can only go so fast. And I think the power of them is getting higher, and they are getting quieter. So they get more and more power, quieter, and it's like, right, okay, now just absolutely drill at it. And you're like, do you remember the first Theraguns, how loud they were? Do you remember, like, everyone turns them on in the class? You're like, don't do the Theragun in here, please. When we're like doing the cool down or something, you just hear, you're like, Jesus. So it's like they've got so much better. The technology's better and everything. But again, it's understanding the why behind what you're doing.
Yeah, and one argument for them, having just slagged them off for 5 minutes, is that it does feel good. So if it's something that feels good, it feels good, and that's almost the long and short of it. So if it feels nice, it's relaxing and it helps you unwind. Same as the stretching after class argument, that if it helps you get into a certain state, then use it as a tool to do so, but just have consideration for the previous points as to whether you're having to do it more and more aggressively to get the same effects over time. Because if that's true, then it's an unsustainable strategy. If it's just some light gunning because it feels nice and it gets you into either ready for a workout or unwinding after a workout, then I don't have an issue with that specific case, provided all the other boxes are ticked.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is if you don't mind using your time on that compared to something else that might be a bit more specific and a bit more effort, then that's fine, as long as you're accepting that that is your choice. And that is what all of this is. These are just our thoughts and our suggestions. You do you. Like if you before your sessions you love gunning yourself and then get into your class warm up, then crack on, do that. But just be conscious of that. So I think I've gone to town on these three. So we hopefully you've pulled some stuff out of it. I think couple of takeaways is be very clear on what you're trying to achieve with all the things that we've discussed. And like with the toe spacers, maybe use different shoes. With the guns, maybe have a bit more specific movement prep. With all the bits of kit, make sure you're balancing it out with using the kit and not using the kit so it doesn't become a crutch. So making sure you've got that balance. Anything else?
I think, it's basically asking that question of can it be better achieved without the gadget? Just ask that question. It might be that it can't and the gadget's really useful, then have at it. But as a general principle for the average person, as little equipment as possible means you're building a body that's self-sufficient rather than reliant on that kit. However, if you're optimizing for performance because you're a competitive athlete, then the rules change. And just consider whether you're in an off season where you're trying to lay foundations versus peaking and getting ready for a competition, in which case the skill of using the kit comes into play. And obviously you're optimizing for maximum performance rather than longevity or anything else.
Yeah, beautiful. So, guys, I hope you really enjoyed today's episode. Number one thing, Spotify now lets you leave reviews. So all you people on Spotify saying, "Oh, sorry, we can't leave you reviews from Spotify." Well, they now give that. So please head over to Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Leave us a cheeky 5-star review. Maybe say how much you love these episodes, or maybe even throw some suggestions of things that you want to see in the future to help us really cater to our audience even more better than we already currently are. As always, head over to our website. All the good stuff's over there, lungeandlift.com. Find us on Instagram at lunge.lift. Most importantly, thank you for your time. 2022, got some really good plans for the year, so really looking forward to sharing them with you guys and taking you on the journey with us. Thank you for everything, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.